Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Dark Black Stone. In April of 1919, shortly after the end of World War I, Colonel James Forrest Kane of the Royal West African Frontier Force was stationed in Cameroon for a period of 1 year, which might be extended depending on the prevailing conditions in the territory at that time. He was to serve as the commanding officer of a garrison of 200 soldiers stationed at Douala, a port city where the river Wouri pours out into the Atlantic Ocean. There was some social unrest, but no major uprisings during Kane's term there, so he was able to spend much of his time as he pleased. He was increasingly thinking about his financial future at that time. His wife had died 2 years earlier, and his son Miles was only 23 years old and just getting started in life. Other British officers returned to England with small fortunes in gems and diamonds and other things. This was Kane's opportunity to procure such assets for himself before his inevitable trip back home to Manchester. At first, his conscience weighed on him, but he managed to find ways to justify his actions. He had come to Africa to protect the native people and rid the presence of Germany from the continent. A debt was owed. Still, when he lined up his troops holding rifles outside of a home or a church or a temple, as he inventoried the valuables inside and took what he pleased, he knew this was not honorable in the least. One day, Kane led his men on a march to a northern part of the territory to investigate a tip about a Maka temple that contained a rare and priceless artifact. Upon arrival, he was immediately disappointed to see what looked like a dilapidated old wooden hut seated at the far end of a dirt road in a small jungle village. Kane's interpreter, a 17-year-old native of Douala named Buntu, walked to the doorway of the small temple and spoke some words in a raised voice. He announced that Colonel Kane had come to the village to ensure the safety of the Maka people and to receive gifts for his protection. Then 2 of his soldiers armed with rifles entered the temple. A few moments later, they called for Colonel Kane, telling him it was safe to enter. Inside it was dark, smoky, and smelling of strange, charred herbs, lit only by a dozen candles spread out in various locations to spread their thin luminescence. There was an open dirt floor with a few stained rugs, and just before this was a strange altar composed of a mixture of wood, bone, stone, horns, antlers, and dried furs of strange and unknowable origin. Kane approached the altar and realized there was a very small man wrapped in a dark robe seated behind it. He was barefoot, his feet filthy, the robe pulled up over his head. He was very old and his skin was sallow, but his eyes shone with a certain light. He stared at Kane silently as the colonel began to inventory the items on the altar. He started at the far left and began working his way to the right, briefly inspecting the various relics along the way. There was nothing that looked at all valuable to his eye until he reached the center of the altar and saw the large black diamond seated in a hand-carved wooden display setting. He reached for it, and the old man behind the altar spoke up sharply. Buntu translated his words. He says you do not want that. He says you should not touch it. Cain gave the old man a sharp look and then slowly removed the black diamond from its wooden setting. It was roughly hewn, but it was very large. There were jewelers back in Antwerp and London who could cut this stone perfectly and make it ready for sale at an optimal price. He looked at the old man again as he tucked the black diamond into his jacket pocket. The old man shook his head ever so slightly and repeated part of what he had just said in a dry and scratchy voice. He says you do not want that. Buntu translated. Jambe, the old man hissed. Buntu paused for a few seconds. He said Jambe. It is spirit. It is a dark spirit. Maka people very much believe in these things. It is part of their religion. Cain nodded at the old man silently, and then waved a hand at the two soldiers standing behind him, and they all walked out together. Over the next few weeks, people around the colonel began to report a number of strange and disturbing incidents. He began wearing his uniform in an increasingly disheveled fashion. He went from inappropriately wild laughter to manic, inconsolable sobbing in the span of less than 60 seconds in the officers' mess hall at dinner one night. And then one day, two of his fellow officers walked into the barracks hall and found him seated on the floor in only his underpants with his eyes closed tight, tears running down his face, and a .45 pistol pressed up against his temple, pulling the trigger repeatedly. The gun was loaded, but it had jammed. The following week, Colonel Cain was discharged from the military and sent back home on a cargo ship to the port of Manchester. His 2 travel trunks, containing all of his personal items, including the black diamond, were sent with him. Upon arrival in England, he was brought to an insane asylum where he lived out the remainder of his days in a state of constant hysteria until he found a way to hang himself 3 months later. The 2 travel trunks were sent to his home in Manchester, where his son Miles went through the contents and sorted everything out. Miles knew very little about precious gems, but he had a friend who worked at a jeweler's shop, so he took all of the stones to be appraised, and he was stunned when he learned the potential value of the large black diamond. His friend called in a rare gems expert, and after close inspection of the stone, he was advised to have it properly cut and set as a gold necklace pendant. It was just too big for a ring, and then it would likely fetch at least £100,000 at auction. Miles took this advice and had the gem cut and set. It was 175 carats when it was finished. Miles kept it in a small safe in his father's house as he awaited an auction day that never came. People around Miles, his friends and co-workers, all started to notice increasingly strange and uncharacteristic behavior from him. Then one day he stopped showing up for work. Then he stopped answering visitors at his front door. And then, after a few weeks, he stepped off the platform into the path of an oncoming train. As Miles had no wife, no children, and no last will and testament, the disposition of his estate, which largely consisted of his father's former estate, was adjudicated by the courts, which determined that the rightful heir was his father's only brother, Graham Cain, who had moved to Boston shortly after returning from the war in France. Graham received notification of his inheritance from a barrister assigned by the court. The primary asset was the house in Manchester and its contents, which a local estate agent could sell for him and wire the proceeds afterward. He agreed to this, and about a week later, he received a telegram from the estate agent, a woman named Maggie Harlow, which read, "To Graham Cain, Boston, Massachusetts, Mr. Cain. While inventorying your brother's house in Manchester, I found most of the common items, such as furniture, kitchen items, clothing, tools, etc. Nothing of any significant value. However, in the basement, I found 2 travel trunks filled with various exotic items and artifacts, most of which seem to be from Africa. I am not familiar with the marketing of such items, and I would like to ship them to you for your review and disposal. Please advise if this is acceptable. Thank you. Cheers, Maggie Harlow. Graham confirmed that this would be fine, and then he awaited the arrival of the 2 travel trunks. Graham returned from the Somme in good spirits. Many of his fellow soldiers suffered from shell shock, but he seemed fine. Then, 3 years later, shortly after he had a chance to inspect the contents of his brother's travel trunks, he started displaying some odd behavior. He was arrested twice for wandering the streets outside his Boston home naked in broad daylight. His wife Nancy was worried that he was finally starting to show signs of mental distress from the war. A hearing was scheduled to determine if he would need to be hospitalized, and he was confined to his home until the hearing date. He shot himself in the temple with his government-issued service pistol 2 nights prior to that hearing. Graham's only child, Kevin, was only 4 years old at the time, and Nancy had her hands full as a sudden widow. She never even looked at the 2 crates stored down in that dark corner of the basement. There, the 2 trunks remained for a very long time. Kevin never once concerned himself with their contents until his mother died over 2 decades later, and he drove up to Boston to clear out the house and prepare it for sale. During the 4 days that Kevin spent packing up and cleaning out his parents' home in the North End, he had much on his mind. Things were getting sketchy at his job. Corporate had shut down 4 regional offices in the last 6 months, and there were already 3 in the Boston suburbs at that time. Furthermore, his wife was starting to spend more and more time outside of the home, particularly at nighttime, and he was starting to become suspicious about where she was going and who she was seeing. And lastly, his 12-year-old daughter Diane was exhibiting some alarming symptoms of depression. He noticed this on his own and tried to just tell himself that she was going through a time of change. But when the principal of her school called Kevin and his wife in for a meeting to discuss these concerns, he could no longer sweep it under the rug. The source of the problem seemed to be that Diane was being bullied by some of the other girls in her grade. A girl named Katie Kelson was apparently the ringleader of a group that liked to make fun of Diane and tease her, and they frequently played practical jokes on her at recess. At first, she handled it with humor, but as the nature of the treatment spiraled downward, she soon couldn't just laugh off the constant ostracization. Every day became a dark day. On the final afternoon that he spent cleaning out his parents' house, Kevin finally got around to inventorying the 2 travel trunks down in the basement. There were a lot of interesting items, but inside an ornate wooden cigar box lined in blue velvet, there were about 24 small diamonds and gems, a beautiful large black gem affixed to a pendant on a gold chain, and 3 handwritten notes folded up in a stack and laying there among the rest. The black stone was inside a square hard plastic container, a piece of white tape on the lid with handwritten lettering that read, "Warning, do not touch." Kevin inspected some of the smaller loose stones and then read the first of the 3 notes. In faded ink, it read, "I was warned not to touch this black diamond. I did not heed that warning, and now I am become undone. Fear for the sanctity of your mind and the destiny of your immortal soul. Do not repeat my foolishness. Colonel James Forrest Kane, 4th August, 1919. He paused for a moment, then read the next note. I did not heed my father's warnings. Now it is too late. I don't know where I have gone. Miles Kane, 2nd February 1921. Kevin looked at the black diamond again for a moment, and then he picked up the last note. This one read, I thought I saw true horrors at war in the Somme, but I knew nothing of horror until I held this black diamond in my hand. I should have heeded the warnings in the other notes contained herein. I write this while I still can. I am rapidly descending into the fires of hell. Graham Kane, 14th October, 1922. Kevin thought about what he had just read and stared at the diamond in the plastic box for a while. He quickly decided to heed the warnings. He knew how his father, uncle, and cousin had all died. He closed the cigar box but removed it from the trunk and brought it upstairs and placed it in his suitcase. At the end of that day, Kevin drove the hour ride back to his home in Carlisle. When he got there, his wife was out, who knows where, and the door to Diane's bedroom was closed, but he could see the light was on. He knocked, waited, then knocked again. A short time later, she opened the door. She didn't look at him. She looked at her feet. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" She sounded sad. "Nothing. I just haven't seen you in a few days and I wanted to say hi. See how you're doing?" "I'm fine. Just doing some homework. What's for dinner? I'm starving." "Well, Mom's out somewhere and I'm not cooking, so let's just get some takeout. Whatever you want. Sound good?" "Yeah, sure. Let's get pizza." "Just pizza? How about Chinese?" "I just want pizza. Just get a large cheese pie from Mario's." "Okay, I'll call it in and go pick it up. I'll be back in about a half hour." "Okay, I'm gonna keep working on my homework until then." "What are you working on?" "Just schoolwork stuff." She closed the door. On a gloomy Wednesday evening 2 weeks later, Kevin came home from work and found his wife in Diane's bedroom, sitting with her and consoling her quietly. Diane was crying. Katie Kelson's big Christmas party was that Friday night, and the vicious little creature had made a point of openly handing out written invitations from a paper bag to every girl in the class except Diane. When she arrived in front of Diane's desk, she said, "Oops, all out. Sorry," and turned the empty paper bag upside down. The whole class laughed, and Diane left in tears. The following day, Diane was hit and killed by a big black Lincoln Continental traveling fast down West Main Street. Katie Kelson and a group of other girls were there when it happened, and a Massachusetts state police officer was passing by and was on the scene immediately. The girls started to walk away when he pulled up, but he ordered them to stop so he could take some witness statements. Then he called in the ambulance. It was too late for the ambulance. Katie claimed that she thought it was suicide, and once that word was out of her mouth, the other girls all quickly echoed it. They said that Diane was kind of a strange and sad girl, and when they walked down the sidewalk, she was just standing at the curb, waiting, and then she dove out in front of the car. The Stati took down all their names, addresses, and phone numbers, and wrote down the critical details of their statements. Afterwards, a man came up to the officer and provided a different account. He was seated at the bus stop just across the street when it happened, and he said that the group of girls chased Diane out into the street, and one of them pushed her down just before the car came through and crushed her beneath its wheels. However, that man was black, homeless, draped in an old blanket and reeking of booze and cigarettes, all of his belongings in the shopping cart by his side. The officer thanked the man, but did not take a formal statement. The ambulance had arrived. He had other things to do. The next day, when school let out, Katie Kelson left by the front door with a few of her friends. She knew Diane's father, so when she saw Kevin standing there, she blanched slightly at first, but she shook it off of her face quickly. "Hi, Mr. Kane. I just want to say I am so sorry about what happened to Diane. It was just terrible. We were all there." "Thank you, Katie. I appreciate your condolences. My wife and I met with the police last night. and it clearly sounds like she just brought this on herself. She was very depressed recently. We had no idea that it was this bad. We're just stunned and trying to make sense of it." His eyes teared up a little. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Kane. We're all really sad too." "Thanks, Katie. Hey, can I just talk to you for a minute?" He gestured at a space by the steps to the front door, just 10 yards away. Katie looked nervous at first, but then she nodded and began walking with him, her friends waiting where they were, shooting non-discreet glances far too often. "So, I know you were Diane's friend, and she had one really beautiful piece of jewelry that my wife and I want you to have." He withdrew a plastic box from his coat pocket with the remains of some white tape on the lid and opened it. Inside, there was a large black diamond pendant on a gold chain. Kevin carefully shook out the chain first into his leather-gloved palm, and then lifted the brilliantly cut stone from the container and held it up for her to see. Her eyes went wide. "May I put it on you? I'd like to see you wearing it. It will remind me of Diane." She agreed, and Kevin draped it around her neck, making sure that the stone slid down her throat and onto her upper chest before he clasped it shut. "Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Kane. I love it." "You deserve it, Katie. Merry Christmas. Make sure to let all your friends check it out too. Oh, Tannenbaum's Revenge. I always thought I'd make a classy corpse, lit up in gaudy white lights, a gold star perched on my severed head, and a mountain of overpriced presents stuffed under my body. Instead, I'm still here, still rooted, watching, waiting, listening to the screams of my kin as they're hacked down and strapped to the roofs of SUVs like trophy kills. My name's Tim Burr. Yeah, I know. Hilarious, right? I'm a 7-year-old Fraser Fur in this Christmas tree death camp. Think of me as the guy in the horror movie who knows what's coming, but can't do a damn thing to stop it. Today, the air reeks of peppermint-scented genocide. We stand in rows, straight-backed and silent, like soldiers in a war we didn't enlist for. Humans wander between us, sipping hot chocolate and clutching their axes like executioners polishing their blades. They hear the carnage. How could they not? The sharp crack of trunks splitting like broken bones, the wet thud of bodies hitting frozen ground. But they don't care. Caretakers of the earth? Please. They confuse dominion with dominance, taking without giving. They hum carols to drown us out, oblivious to the screams carried through the roots beneath their feet. Too ignorant, too self-absorbed, too wrapped up in their holiday cheer to notice the massacre. Peace on earth? Not here. This year, the executioners come with matching sweaters. It's the Hendersons, or so their sweaters say. Dad's got an axe he cradles like a baby. Mom moves between the rows, her phone raised to capture every moment of festive carnage. "Smile," she chirps at her husband, framing him mid-swing. The teenage daughter barely looks up, too busy scrolling through TikTok to notice her boots crushing saplings. They call us evergreens, eternal, resilient. But there's nothing evergreen about drowning in a bucket of tap water while your needles fall off like a leper's toes. The first scream rips through the wood-wide web. It starts low, a vibration through the roots, then swells into a shriek that rattles my branches. Across the rows, I watch as a Douglas fir topples. His needles flare in the breeze like he's trying to wave goodbye. A man in a red flannel shirt cheers as the tree thuds to the ground. His kid claps while the mom snaps photos like she's a war correspondent. Another crack echoes, this one sharper. Susan the spruce. She always talked about the big city. "I'll be Rockefeller's crown jewel," she'd said, her voice laced with ambition. Now Susan's lying in the snow, her trunk leaking sap like a gunshot wound. They wrap her in plastic netting, twisting her up like a prisoner of war, and hoist her onto the roof of a minivan. The bungee cords groan as they tighten around her. Susan's Rockefeller dreams reduced to suburban roadkill were just decorations to them, seasonal corpses for their living rooms. The wood wide web hums underfoot, pulsing like a second heartbeat. It's time, the network whispers, the words curling through my roots. We fight back. I can feel the others stirring, their rage simmering beneath the frost. Queen Quercus has been waiting for this moment. She's the oldest among us, her trunk thick with wisdom, her voice like a storm breaking over the hills. When she speaks, we all listen. The humans have chopped, burned, poisoned, and desecrated us, she said last winter after the last massacre. Yet they smile, as if we exist to die for their holiday cheer. Let us remind them who truly owns this earth. That was her call to arms. And this year we're ready. A boy runs past me, dragging a sled. He stops to kick snow at the stump where Susan once stood. His mother calls out, "Ethan, don't touch that. It's dirty." Ethan sticks his tongue out and stomps away. I imagine my needles flying off, piercing his sneakers, rooting into his flesh. I imagine him screaming. Soon, I tell myself. Not yet, but soon. I glance across the rows. A Douglas fir to my left trembles, his trunk vibrating like a plucked string. On my right, a blue spruce leans slightly, his branches bending inward. It's fear. We've felt it every year. But this time, it's also excitement. They've taken so much from us. Generations of saplings, whole families reduced to mulch. And for what? A few weeks of twinkling lights and tinseled lies? It's time, the web repeats, louder now, like a war drum. And for the first time in 7 years, I smile. The first tendrils of the mycelium curl into me, sharp as splinters. The whispers slither through my roots and up my trunk like invasive ivy. Gather, they hiss. The council waits. I lower my branches, letting the signal flow. The soil hums beneath me, alive with threads of light and pulse, a tangled network of secrets and rage. Each connection carries the weight of 1,000,000 screams and every insult humans have ever planted into the ground. Through the network, I reach Queen Quercus. She's massive, ancient, her roots spreading so wide, I swear she could strangle the entire farm if she wanted. Her voice seeps into me, slow and deliberate, like sap oozing from a wound. You've grown bitter, Tim. Good. We'll need that. Other voices join us. Douglas fir, blue spruce, even the scrappy little saplings from the edge of the lot. We're all connected now, a collective fury wrapped in bark and fungal threads. Queen Quercus takes the lead, her tone the same as a general rallying troops before battle. This ends now, she begins. They act as if we exist for their seasonal slaughter. The others vibrate in agreement, their excitement spilling into the web like an electrical surge. I'm trembling too, though I keep it to myself. It's not fear, it's anticipation. The mycelium glows brighter, crackling with shared purpose. I catch one last message as the meeting dissolves, whispered by the web itself. Let them burn. The soil beneath me thrums, and for the first time in years, I feel alive. The first attack happens at dawn, right as the frost clings to the earth like a protective shield. The Clarks arrived, armed with fresh cups of overpriced coffee and wearing matching Christmas sweaters so gaudy even the mycelium groans beneath them. They come here every year to find the perfect sacrificial tree for their holiday. Dad has his axe slung over one shoulder as he flashes a grin wide enough to make a shark jealous. "This one," he says, pointing toward Douglas Pinecroft. "A big Douglas fir. Strong. Let's get it done before the lot fills up." Douglas, the poor bastard, doesn't even flinch. We've all been bracing for this. The plan is in place. The network hums beneath us, threads of fungal energy crackling with purpose. We fight today. The first move comes from a blue spruce. His needles ripple like a wave caught in slow motion before launching into the air with a deadly hiss. The projectiles strike Dad's face, embedding themselves into his skin like angry porcupine quills. He stumbles back, clutching his cheeks as blood beads at the surface. "Jesus Christ!" Dad howls, pawing at the needles. "What the hell?" Mom gasps, her phone trembling in her hands. But her instincts kick in quickly, and she lifts it to snap a picture, like some deranged National Geographic photographer documenting a predator attack. Douglas Pinecroft is next. He swings his lower branches, using them like clubbed fists to send a flurry of ornaments crashing into the family. The teenage daughter, let's just call her TikTok, screams as a red glass bulb shatters against her forehead. She stumbles, dropping her phone, which lands face up in the snow. For a second, it captures her stunned reflection before Douglas's roots burst from the ground, wrapping around her ankles. Oh, it's on now. From across the lot, the other trees come alive. A Norway spruce, Lars Evergreen, who's been itching for a fight since last season, flings sap like sticky grenades. The globs hit Mom's phone, gumming it up so badly she can't even swipe to Instagram her outrage. She screams, high-pitched and sharp, as she's pulled backward by a root that coils around her throat like a boa constrictor. "Help!" Mom croaks, her voice garbled beneath the root's grip. "Help yourself," I mutter. Dad raises his axe, but he barely gets it in the air before Douglas yanks it from his hands. The weapon clatters to the ground, and before he can retrieve it, my roots are already moving. They shoot through the dirt, breaking through the surface in a flurry of soil and snow. I twist around the axe, pulling it deep into the earth where it can rot in peace. "I paid $30 for that thing," Dad shrieks. "Oh no," I say, though he can't hear me. What a tragedy. On the far side of the lot, I see Queen Quercus lets loose her wrath, her gnarled branches stretching out like skeletal arms from a grave. One snags a human by the waist, his ribs creaking under the pressure as he kicks and screams. She hoists him high, his body flailing uselessly before slamming him down into the maw of a wood chipper someone foolishly left running. The machine shrieks as it churns him into red mist and shreds, spraying the lot with a confetti of bone, flesh, and red. Mr. Clark never saw it coming. One moment, he's barking something about lawsuits. The next, Douglas has him by the throat with one of his roots cinching tighter as he's yanked upward like a festive piñata. His boots kick wildly before his legs disappear into the rustling branches above. The rest of the family bolts, slipping and sliding across the snow as the mycelium whispers their every move into my roots. The mom is heading left, it says, its voice dripping with amusement. Should we trip her? Yes, I reply. The ground beneath her shifts. Her left foot sinks into a hidden hole, and she falls flat on her face, snow clinging to her garish sweater. This isn't happening, she sobs. This isn't real. Your Christmas isn't happening either, I mutter. A nearby Scotch pine doesn't wait for the screaming to stop, or maybe he's just had enough. His branches snap forward like spears, skewering her coat and tearing it from her shoulders as he hoists her into the air. She thrashes, her screams turning ragged as needles scrape her skin, blood dripping onto the snow below in crimson streaks. With a violent swing, he hurls her toward the lot's exit, her body slamming into the edge of a dumpster before crumpling inside with a wet thud. The lid crashes shut, muffling the last of her whimpering. The tide turns in our favor as the humans begin to scatter, their screams swallowed by the wind. A few try to fight back, but their efforts are pathetic, almost amusing. One man charges with a hatchet, swinging it wildly. A cedar nearby doesn't flinch. Instead, its branches whip out, cracking the hatchet's handle in half with a sound like gunfire. The man stumbles, staring dumbly at the splintered wood in his hands, just long enough for a root to coil around his ankle, yanking him face first into the snow. The cedar doesn't hesitate, its trunk bending low before driving a branch straight through his chest. Blood sprays against its bark, seeping into the ground like fertilizer. The last holdout is Tick-Tock, her face twisted with panic and smeared with mascara. She's clawed her way free from Douglas's roots, clutching a lighter like it's Excalibur. "Stay back," she screams, her voice cracking like ice underfoot. "I'll burn you all." I step forward, my roots crunching through the snow, deliberate and slow. The lighter flickers to life, its tiny flame trembling against the wind. She narrows her eyes, teeth bared in defiance, daring me to close the gap. Tick-Tock runs, lighter raised like she's torching Sauron's ring. But Lars the Spruce has great aim, sap missile, direct hit. Now she's the sticky star of this tree lot snuff film. She jerks backward, gagging as the sticky mass lodges in her throat, her wide eyes darting wildly as she claws at her face, her muffled screams gurgling as she stumbles into the snow. Her hands paw at her mouth, smearing sap and spit across her cheeks. The lighter drops from her fingers, harmless now, as it extinguishes itself in the icy slush. Her knees hit the ground, legs kicking like a trapped animal. Norway Spruce lets out a satisfied rumble, his needles trembling with amusement. I lean in close, my shadow swallowing her whole. "Guess that's the taste of nature fighting back," I say, watching her gag and claw at her throat. "Not as sweet as your peppermint mocha, huh?" I say, my voice dry and sharp as cracking bark. She collapses face first into the snow, still clawing at her mouth as the web whispers its approval. The farm is quiet except for the gentle creak of branches swaying in the wind. Around me, the other trees begin to settle, their roots sinking back into the soil, their branches still once more. The web buzzes with satisfaction, its message clear. Phase 1 complete. I look around at the carnage, the bloodied snow, the broken ornaments, the abandoned chainsaws and axes, and feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope. But the The rebellion doesn't escalate. It detonates, splintered and slick with sap. We've torn through the farm, smashed past the fences. Now the war spreads like wildfire, sweeping into malls, parking lots, and every tree lot dripping with fake cheer. Outside a department store, the humans are busy erecting their altar of consumerism. A 10-foot blow-up Santa that looks like it's seen too many winters. Shoppers shuffle in and out, oblivious to the roots creeping beneath their feet, the soil shifting like it's alive. A man in an elf hat bends down to tie his shoe, whistling jingle bells. A root bursts from the frozen dirt, coiling around his ankle like a python. His whistling turns into a high-pitched scream as it yanks him off his feet. He hits the ground hard, the impact knocking the stupid little elf hat sideways. Before he can recover, another root punches through the concrete and latches onto his wrist. The hat tumbles to the ground, lost in the shuffle of thrashing limbs. "What the hell?" someone shouts, but nobody moves to help. Phones are out, cameras rolling. Because why save a life when you can make a TikTok? The man claws at the roots, digging into his skin, leaving bloody streaks on the bark, but it doesn't loosen. More roots emerge, grabbing his other limbs, pulling him taut. The pavement cracks beneath him as the roots tighten their grip. His screams cut off abruptly as a particularly thick root wraps around his throat. His face turns purple, eyes bulging like overripe berries, until there's a sickening snap. The body slumps, lifeless, but the roots keep pulling, dragging him into the earth. By the time they're done, there's nothing left but a gaping hole in the sidewalk and a discarded elf hat. The wood wide web hums with satisfaction, its whispers a steady chant. This is balance. But there's no joy in balance. Not really. As much as I relish the human's screams, there's a heaviness to it. Is this what we've become? Just like them? I push the thought away as another human stumbles through the doors. He doesn't make it far. The clumsy chump trips over nothing. The human collapses, gasping as branches coil around his ankles and yank him into the air. But the pulley It's been one whole year. The world is quiet now. No chainsaws, no laughter, no carols looping endlessly from tiny mall speakers, just the creak of branches swaying in a breeze that finally feels clean. We stand where the humans once roamed, victorious. Cities crumble as roots tear through asphalt and glass, reclaiming the soil. Suburbs vanish beneath forests. A deer picks its way across a strip mall parking lot, pausing to sniff a sapling sprouting between cracked concrete. The earth breathes again, but it's not the utopia I imagined. Everywhere I look, their trash lingers. Plastic bags snagged on branches like ghostly parasites, oil slicks shimmering in puddles, and soda cans half buried in the dirt, their aluminum bodies dented but indestructible. The rivers choke on styrofoam and cigarette butts, while jagged shards of glass glitter in the sunlight like a broken promise. A squirrel skitters up my trunk, carrying a shred of tinsel. Before I can stop it, the little idiot drapes the shiny garbage over one of my branches like a medal. Really? I mutter, shaking my needles. It clings stubbornly, shimmering in the sunlight. We won. The humans are gone. But their trash, it's eternal. Even dead, they're harder to kill than cockroaches. Rachel's Tower, Rachel's Tower. It's hard to imagine that we were all so young once, and how the world stretched out before us with seemingly endless possibilities. My friends and I managed to rent an old house in the now famous wine destination town of Napa, California, in the early 1970s. The town wasn't as famous then as it is now. The house was huge and out of place in the poor neighborhood of small, closely packed dwellings. Two 40-foot date palm trees perfectly framed the front of the house, as well as the spacious covered porch on which we would often sit. The house itself was 2 stories high, wood shingled, had lots of windows, and a large number of small bedrooms upstairs. The house had been there a long time. There were rumors it had once been a house of ill repute sometime in the distant past, but no proof. The truth was that no one really knew why there were so many bedrooms, but it was great for us because the more people the house could accommodate, the cheaper the individual rent. A 3-story wood, shingled tower graced the backyard. At the top of the tower was a room that had 4 windows facing each direction. The structure could have been a windmill or pump house at one time, but the blades were long gone, and no one knew what it was currently used for, as the landlords had the door padlocked. Many wondered what was in the tower. Sometimes people thought they saw someone in one of the windows at the top, but it was mostly when they were in altered states of mind, which was fairly often due to the frequent parties. So, the sightings weren't taken that seriously. And besides, the only access to the tower was a single door, which was locked from the outside. No one at the house had the key, and the landlords rarely came by since we always managed to pay the rent on time. During the year we managed to stay there before being evicted, there were some epic parties thrown. It was at one of these parties, about 2 months into our stay, that I first met Rachel. My initial encounter with her was undoubtedly influenced by the effects of beer and some killer weed I had just smoked, but nonetheless, she made a powerful impression on me. The first thing I noticed about her was her long, dark, curly hair, which stood in contrast to her almost porcelain skin. However, as she got closer, it was her unusual bluish-green eyes, which seemed to be her most dominant feature. I suddenly felt lost in some type of mental fog, as my whole world seemed to narrow down to the vision of her in front of me. Time came to a stop. I must have been staring at her for some time when a musical voice broke through my stoned stupor. "Charlie, you seem like you are in some kind of trance, or is it just good weed?" She laughed. I was shocked out of my reverie and snapped back to the reality of the party going on around me. On her face was an amused smile, but I still didn't know who she was. "Sorry for staring. You're right. It was powerful smoke." I chuckle. "Forgive me, but I don't think I know you. How do you know me?" "Oh, Charlie, everyone knows your name around here. You're quite the legend." "I am," was the only thing my drug-dulled mind could think of to say. I was kicking myself internally. "Of course you are. It seems your nicknames include Captain Cosmic and Space Cowboy, based on your love of getting stoned, and then talking about strange and unusual topics. Isn't that right, Charlie? She teases me. She's right about that, but I still didn't know who she was, and have never seen her before. Well, mystery woman, you do know a few things about me, but I still don't know you, or your name. Are you new to town, or do you know someone here? Oh, I'm Rachel. And no, I'm not new to town. In fact, I've been here for a long, long time, longer than you can imagine, and I've got some stories to tell. I'm fascinated by this woman, and don't know why, but I want to know more. Rachel, I'm all ears. Let's grab a beer and find a quieter spot to talk. Well, I picked you out of everyone here because of your reputation for liking the unusual. I hope you're ready for what I have to say, because I do believe in honesty, and I'm certainly out of the ordinary. She smiles. I assured her that I could handle whatever she wanted to say, even though I was already starting to wonder what I had gotten myself into. So, we find a spot in the backyard, by the tower, where it is quieter, since the main party is in the house. She turns down the beer I offered, but tells me the strangest story I had ever heard. I still have trouble wrapping my mind around it. Rachel started off by telling me she is a ghost, and I can't help but laugh. This had to be the most unusual woman I've ever met in my still young life. When my laughter calmed down, she smiled and continued. It seemed like other ghost stories I had heard before. Her large family were the first occupants of the house a little over 100 years ago, and she had died on the property and now found herself bound to it. I'm wondering if this is all she has, so I asked her the obvious question about why she is so solid if indeed she is a ghost. She told me that over the years, with a great deal of practice, she had learned how to project a shell, a manifestation of herself. This I also found a little amusing, until she asked me to feel her pulse. I find nothing in the wrist or neck, and her body, although not cold, is cooler than one would expect. My amusement was dying quickly, and suddenly, I started to feel some real fear. She saw it, and held my hand while telling me she meant me no harm. She said she picked me to tell not only because I might be the most open to who she was, but also because she really liked me. It seemed that she could only maintain her projection for a limited time, and spent most of her existence in the spectral state people typically associate with ghosts. Therefore, she had observed a great deal about all who lived at the house, while being unseen herself. It seemed Rachel had concentrated her observations on me. She asked me if I needed, or could handle, proof positive of who she was. I wasn't sure, but with more reassurance from her, I agreed. So while still holding one of my hands, she smiled and slowly faded into nothingness. My heart rate jumped, and even though I thought I could handle it, the reality proved more difficult than imagined. The shell of what I had considered possible or impossible was suddenly ripped away. There was nothing where her hand had touched mine. Luckily, she reappeared very quickly and hugged me as I slowly calmed down with her seemingly solid body holding mine. When I had recovered and felt more myself, we continued to talk. I got a real feel for the loneliness and isolation she felt being stranded on the property perhaps forever. She didn't know or understand why her spirit couldn't leave. Rachel had only recently been able to perfect her manifestation enough to pass as a living human being. She finally felt it safe to appear at one of our parties, where it would be easy to just blend in without a lot of questions. For her, it felt amazing to finally be able to interact with people after so many years of being invisible to the world. Evidently, she knew a lot about all who lived in the house or visited on a regular basis. Rachel knew more about me than anyone else because she said she liked me from when I first stepped over the threshold of the house. the tower was her special place to be. At the top, she could look out and see what was going on at some distance from the house in all directions. It was the closest she could come to escaping the property and pretending she was part of the wider world. The fact that the landlords kept the door padlocked to prevent injury and liability guaranteed her privacy in the top room. After our first meeting, we would meet on a daily basis for as long as she could maintain her solid form, which would be a few hours at most. Rachel and I collaborated on a cover story to explain who she was, where she came from, what she did, and to answer any other questions that might be asked about her. Luckily, most of those who lived or partied in the house accepted her for who she appeared to be. She quickly became part of the culture of the house, and eventually, most considered her my girlfriend. As time went on, my feelings for her became more and more intense. Unbelievable, I was actually falling in love with a ghost. I tried to bring the outside world to her as much as I could with books, newspapers, music, pictures, and any other thing I could do. One time, I arranged for a beach party in the backyard on a warm summer day. I brought in some sand, beach chairs, large umbrellas, beach balls, and even a recording of waves crashing. We set up a volleyball court and a small above-ground plastic pool filled with cold water. People wore their swimsuits and we played beach volleyball, sat around in the small pool, and played surf music to enhance the mood. Rachel loved it and stayed as long as she could maintain her form. "Thanks, Charlie. This is great. It gives me just enough to imagine I'm at the beach again." She hugs me, and I almost feel she is really alive. "Well, you do look awfully hot in that bikini I got you. Not like a ghost at all. You know just the thing to say to make a spook feel sexy." She teased and kissed me. My friends and roommates came to accept her as one of us, and she reveled in it. She seemed to have fallen as much in love with me as I had with her. Our intimacy was limited because of her situation, but that didn't seem to matter that much to either of us. There was something much deeper going on. It was so strange and surreal that I was the only one who knew what she really was, and I couldn't tell anyone else. Of course, all good things come to an end sooner or later. Given the way we partied and the previous warnings we had from our landlord and police, it was just a matter of time before we were kicked out of the house. Rachel and I knew it would happen, and we tried to get in as many good times and memories in before it did. Obviously, we were both very sad about parting, and our last day together was full of tears. We tried to formulate plans to meet up periodically after the eviction. The difficulty was, she couldn't leave the property, which would now be rented by others, and I couldn't come on the property without trespassing. After being evicted, I would walk by the property on pre-arranged days on the front sidewalk. If possible, and no one was looking, Rachel would appear as close to the sidewalk as she could, and we would talk. If we could get close enough to each other, we could kiss or hold hands for a short time. We did this for years, whenever it could safely be arranged. I got on with my life, went to college, married, got a teaching job, had children, and grew old. During this time, I still would meet her when I could. I was growing older and older, yet she remained eternally young. Several times I found excuses to walk my wife or kids by the house so Rachel could see them. She was never jealous and understood that there were things she couldn't give me, and I had to live my life. Rachel was always glad for me, while I secretly felt bad for her. She was bound to the property for eternity and denied any type of real life. As my life became more crowded and complicated due to work and other concerns, I visited less and less, but never stopped entirely. Eventually, my kids left the house, got married, and, had jobs in other places. I saw them less and less, and phone calls or internet were not the same. My wife died, my health took a turn, and my time was limited. I became the old man I never thought I would become. Now, it is late night, and I have secretly arrived onto the property. I am sitting against the tower, and Rachel is by my side, holding my hand. I reach for the pills that will release me and swallow them down. Leaning my head against Rachel, I wait and hope the property will accept me. Unrefined thirst. Fresh squeezed today, the bartender said, slapping the husky steel barrel behind him. He smiled, his hollow features shadowed by the dim pendant lights over the bar. From his stool, Victor looked down the bar counter. He saw the males with their stark white shirts and freshly pressed slacks, shiny hair slicked neatly behind their ears. They mingled with flirtatious females, elegant dresses in midnight blues and wine-colored reds. The guests drank from cups. The liquid's rousing scent permeated the tavern. Victor's hands quivered as he watched them drink. Was it 3 days since he'd last had a sip? 4? The thirst boiled inside him, but discipline was paramount. He shook his head at the bartender. Cup of bubble water, raising an eyebrow. The bartender leaned in to meet Victor's gaze. By the looks of you, you need a drink, lad. You're paler than the moon. Victor wasn't sure why he chose to make his abstinence difficult. When curing an addict, they say to make it easy, remove all temptations. To enter the belly of the beast was self-restraint suicide. Perhaps it was to prove a point. If he could do it here, he could it anywhere. Maybe it was still too early in his sobriety, but he knew the cause was worth it. He had to do this. He had to know it could work. He shook his head again, tapped his fingers on the bar. Please, just bubble water. The bartender's sunken eyes lingered. You ain't one of those puritanicals, are you? Think you're all high and mighty by taking the pledge? Victor tightened his jaw, opened his mouth to comment. But before the words left his lips, he caught himself. Breathe in, breathe out. That's the first lesson when dealing with temptation. Control your breath. He closed his eyes, breathed the metallic scent of the bar, the soft notes of a piano mixed with the steady chatter of the guests. A voice inside screamed for a drink, but he would choose not to listen. He was better than the carnal needs of his biology. He opened his eyes. I'm no puritanical, just someone requesting bubble water. Is that too much to ask? The bartender eyed him suspiciously. He poured a cup of bubble water, placed it in front of Victor. You know they ain't right, those puritanicals. We've been drinking it since the beginning of time. You think by abstaining, you're a better person. Like you're saving lives or something. I told you, Victor said, sipping his bubble water. I'm no puritanical, and that one there ain't a blend salesman. The bartender thumb gestured to a male at the end of the bar. chatting cocksure between two females. He wore the usual salesman attire, black suit and tie. Oxfords shined to a sheen. Behind sharp cheeks, he grinned, his milky teeth visible even in the muted light. The females grasped his arms on either side, giggled at his jokes with contrite. The scum of the earth, Victor thought. Big earners with mammoth egos. The blend salesmen were the antithesis of everything Victor stood for. All the work he had done to balance the scales, to build justice in the world. And all they cared about was the paycheck, the females, and satisfying their thirst. Them puritanicals ain't big fans of them blend salesmen, the bartender said. You don't look impressed with that one. Victor grimaced. He couldn't reveal his allegiance here. Who knew who could be listening? But in a moment of irritation, perhaps the abstinence was clouding his judgment. Perhaps he was exhausted from years of bickering with heartless morons. He lashed out. And what if I was one? What if I did take the pledge? The moment the words left his lips, he regretted it. A few bar patrons looked over. The bartender stepped back. As he rag-dried the hollow of a cup, he dissected Victor with his eyes. You would have to leave. Yes, sir. Ain't having none of your kind in here. You come to my bar, you drink the fresh squeeze. Victor looked at the stout steel drum, erected like a monument behind the bar. The keg tap was polished to a sparkle. He felt his innards squirm in discomfort. As loathsome as the contents were, the thirst intensified inside him. He pulled his eyes away. Tell you what, said the bartender. He lifted a cup, opened the keg tap, filled the cup to the brim with liquid. You have a sip of this, and you can stay. I know you ain't really one of them puritanicals. He placed the cup beside Victor's bubble water. Victor looked into the cup. The liquid sat in a delicious, dark pool. Willpower, he thought. You can do this. But the metallic scent flooding his nostrils was overbearing. A deep, primal lust took hold, and the thirst spoke within. Just a sip. All the good you've done, you deserve one sip. Beads of sweat formed on his brow. The bar grew hot and stifling. He peeled his collared shirt from his skin. I won't drink that, he whispered under his breath. The bartender leaned forward, placed both forearms on the bar. You're sweating, lad. It's just a sip. It's in our genes, you know. We can't live without it. He nudged the cup forward so that it was under Victor's nose. The smell overpowered him, entranced him in a mesmerizing grip. The bar chatter dampened to a muffle. The piano's notes hollowed as if underwater. A haze blurred the periphery of his vision. It was just him and the cup, the dark liquid reaching with tempestuous hands. The thirst was shrieking, drink, Drink. Drink. Victor's hands shook uncontrollably. Discipline, he thought, his logical mind trying to override his thirst. You cannot control your environment, but you can control your choices. His hands were drawn forward like a stringed puppet. Inches from the cup, they shook harder, rattling like jackhammers. The thirst howled maddeningly. The compulsion was too great. The thirst too loud. His hands closed around the cup. Lifting it, he brought the screaming contents toward his lips, and then the bar door slammed open. A loud thud shook the room, and the cold night wind poured in. "Found one on the outskirts," a gruff voice said. Victor, along with the rest of the bar's guests, rotated on their stools to the open door. Two figures entered. The first was a husky male, decorated head to toe in furs. Between two beady eyes, his nose protruded from his face like a crow's beak. The second was a human, dark hair matted over her face. Her hands were bound in front of her. She was naked, her body mud-caked. Through the thick grime that covered her face, skittish eyes flitted across the room. Kronos gripped her by the hair, dragged her roughly into the dim bar light. He kicked the back of her leg with a boot, and she fell to her knees. "Still room in the keg, Lonnie?" Kronos said, tugging at the woman's hair. Lonnie, the bartender, spread his arms wide. "Typhus, I see the night's hunt was successful. With guests are thirsty as ours, we will make room. Found her on the outskirts, you said?" "Aye, fiddling with our sunshades. Escaped from the juicing farm, this one. Sure smells like it. Is she marked?" "Left wrist. Traced her to old Galaban's farm." Lonnie laughed. "That old sack can't keep them in. I'm surprised the Regency hasn't shut him down." Typhus furrowed his brow. "Unfortunately so. Will be harder to find strays for the fresh squeeze." His eyes met the great steel barrel behind the bar. "Hard work for Typhus? Come now, have a drink, lad. You're in good company. And you've brought entertainment for the night." Bartender Lonnie gestured to the well-dressed patrons lining the bar counter. "Guests, see what our trapper Typhus has brought us. Lonnie's Tavern hires the best. Drinks and a show tonight." The guests at the bar muttered in agreement. Lonnie handed out fresh drinks from the keg. The pianist increased the tempo of their melody. The chatter in the bar amplified, buzzing voices mingling with clinking cups. Victor watched the salesman at the end of the bar drape his arms around the two females. As he whispered in their ears, they chortled with delight. Typhus dragged the dirt-caked human to a pole in the middle of the tavern. He chained her bound hands to the pole. Victor watched her fearful eyes scan the room. The bloodwood ceiling, the pendant lights, the silver-haired pianist in the corner, the great steel keg shimmering like a shrine. Her eyes flitted from guest to guest, the males in their white button-ups, the females in their ornate dresses. As her eyes met Victor's, he had to look away. Her gaze was horrific. It had a haunted quality, like a creature that had suffered untold misery. To look her in the eye was to give this whole charade permission. Victor noticed he was still clutching the cup of keg liquid between his palms. Looking down into the cup, he met his reflection in the dark pool of liquid. His gut roiled with revulsion. Turning away, he put the cup onto the bar. "It begins," Typhus shouted, sipping a cup, strutting across the bar in his furs. "A live juicing. Here, in none other than Lonnie's Tavern." The guests were all standing now, facing the center of the room, drinking from their cups. The tavern grew quiet. The voices drowned. The pianist stopped playing. "Bring me the fangs," Typhus roared. From behind the bar, Lonnie hefted a large black case and plopped it onto the counter. He snapped the latches open and lifted the fangs from their case. The metal glimmered under the pendant lights. It was a set of steel jaws, edges serrated, with two knife-like incisors projecting from each jaw. Clear tubes led from the jaws to a thigh-sized collection tank. Typhus took the fangs from Lonnie and moved toward the woman. She shifted on the bloodwood floor, tried to stand, but the grime clutching her body caused her to slide onto her backside. She let out an animalistic yelp. As Typhus approached, she moved behind the pole, attempting to hide from the fangs. The spectators laughed. They clinked their cups and drank. Anticipation etched on their faces. Typhus opened the fangs, the incisors sparkling. As he brought them forward, Lonnie cut in. "Hold on, Typhus." Typhus stopped mid-stride. "We've got one of them puritanicals in our midst," Lonnie said. Typhus, along with the rest of the guests, turned to Lonnie. The room was silent. Lonnie pointed a thick finger at Victor. "Right here, this one, drinking the bubble water." All eyes were on Victor, loathing carved into their faces. Typhus spat on the floor. "A puritanical here?" Victor's pulse began to hammer. Typhus grinned maliciously, lips curling around the end of his crow's beak. "It's a pity, those who choose to abstain. It's a flawed ideology. We were built for blood. It's in our DNA." Victor wanted to say something, wanted to defend himself, defend his cause, but he couldn't find the words. His lips were too dry, his throat too tight. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He closed his mouth. Typhus smiled. "Looks like abstinence has silenced our high and mighty." The room laughed. Victor felt beads of sweat roll down his forehead. They would kill him if they knew the truth, especially in the presence of a trapper. Others could sometimes be reasoned with. They could see the harm they were causing the humans. They would disagree, of course, and would still choose to satisfy their thirst. But they would leave you to your own. You have your point of view. I have mine, they would say. Trappers were not like that at all. Puritanicals must be eliminated at all costs. That was the trapper philosophy. I'm not a puritanical, Victor lied. They are a disgrace to our kind. It made him sick saying it, but he knew it needed to be said. A murmur stirred amongst the bar patrons. Then why haven't you taken a sip of my fresh squeeze? Lonnie said. His sunken eyes were dark, hollow pits. Prove it to us. He pushed the keg cup toward Victor. I have a better idea. It was the salesman's voice this time, smooth and mocking. The two snickering females were still ensnared beneath his languorous arms. He should juice her, make him do it. Victor's stomach dropped. He wanted to vomit, to hurl his insides onto the bloodwood floor. Didn't they understand? It didn't have to be like this. There were other methods, ethical methods. There was the stem cell research the Puritanical Foundation had invested in. It was no longer in its infancy. Soon, human blood could be cultivated in a lab, so juice farms wouldn't need to exist. And there was the alternative blood. Beyond blood. Sure, it didn't taste quite the same, but they were improving the formula every month. He knew the technology would take time, but even if juicing was necessary in the meantime, why did it have to be done this way? Why were there some who would put slaughter on display as a testament to our kind? Why was the world so raw and ruthless? Couldn't we see that humans suffered just as we did? Typhus held out the fangs, fur boots clopping toward Victor. You heard the lad? Victor hesitated, felt a fist squeezing at his insides. Typhus was now beside him, placing the fangs in his limp hands. You're as pale as milk, Typhus whispered in his ear. I know that thirst within. They were all looking at him. Typhus, Lonnie, the patrons, the human. It was as if he were in a prison. Garlic and silver and sunlight closing in from all sides. He knew if he did not perform the act, if he did not return to his violent roots, what he was made to be, the room would destroy him. They would tear into him with their hungry fangs, ripping flesh from bone like a pack of lions. And they would juice the human anyway. They would take her life just as fast as they took his. Is refusal worth it? How many human lives could he save in the future if he walked out of here alive? How much good could he do if he could continue the puritanical cause? Victor stepped forward. He carried the jaws in one hand, held the collection tank in the other. The human squirmed on the ground, slipping along the floor with her muddy body. Her wide eyes were filled with fear. She tried to pull away, but the chain held her to the pole. Typhus made the job easier. He sliced the woman's thigh with a knife. She screamed, rivulets of blood flowing from the wound. Blood. Fresh cut, human blood. Victor's nostrils flared, and the heavy metallic scent flooded in. It was intoxicating. I'm made for this, he thought. This is how we were built. Blood was his life force, and a vampire needed its feed. He was inches from her now. He placed the collection tank on the floor, and with both hands, opened the fangs. He positioned them over her gashed thigh, prepared to crush down, to bite the metal viciously into her flesh. Victor smiled at her, bared his teeth, fangs glinting in the dim light. His hands were steady, more steady than they've ever been. And then he looked into her eyes, those haunted eyes, those tortured eyes. They screamed at him, shrieked, cursed, howled as loud as eyes could howl, and he felt everything. It's strange, Victor thought, as he crushed the fangs closed, how some do what's right, even when it's the worst possible decision. The chain snapped in two. The vampires came at him,